Heather, what if someone is in a marriage, and this is, again, kind of assuming that there is an awareness of we want to work towards mutual satisfaction, enjoyment in sexuality, but they are able to acknowledge, I'm the spouse that really has no interest in sex anymore, or it's really happening very, very infrequently, only once in a while when they want to. What might we say to someone who's in that position in the marriage that just isn't interested anymore? What encouragement would you offer? What steps might they consider?
Mm-hmm. So this is an interesting question because there could be a lot of reasons why somebody isn't even interested in sex. And some of it could be related to trauma. Some of it could be physically. I know that for a lot of women that that sometimes having sex is painful, and that's not normal. And I guess that too, I would ask that a backup question would be, why? Is it that I want to have sex with my husband, but there's all of these things that are kind of stacking up against me and I don't know where to start? Or is it that I just really don't have any drive? And so sometimes I think that it could be a million things, right? And I guess that it would be to kind of sort it out and see what it is. Because if it's something that's physical, then you could go see a doctor. If you want to restore that part of your relationship with your spouse, you could go to a doctor and investigate what it is. If it's something that you think maybe could be trauma related, or that having sex or physical connection like that is triggering, then you could go and see a counselor who specializes in those kind of like sex abuse or sexual relationships, and even look at it that way, trying to uncover or discover maybe something that happened to you that isn't even something that you are consciously aware of, but maybe could be inhibiting. I know that there are a lot of women who they never really enjoyed sex to begin with in their relationship. And then they go through menopause and then they're like, oh, great. Now I don't even have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that to me I think is frequent, is something that happens commonly, but then it's a little bit sad to me why somebody wasn't even having good sex, and that it really comes back to that whole communication thing that we were talking about, that women, like at women's conferences, we always, do this huge thing on sex, and we tell women about their bodies, and these are your erogenous zones, and these are, this is how you can, have great sex. And then women will come up and say, can you tell me those again? I want to write those down. Can you, because I think sometimes for women, they don't even know. You know what I mean? They weren't raised in an environment where they even knew what they liked or didn't like and then
or were given permission to feel those things.
Exactly. Right. And then they get in a marriage relationship and it's like, okay, well, this is more of the same. And so this isn't fun. And I don't know how to communicate this. And I'm just going to make my grocery list in my head while we're having sex until it's over. And then, you know what I mean? And so I think that there are a million reasons why somebody could behave the way that they behave. I guess my bigger point would be, if it's something that you want, if it's something that you want to be part of your relationship, then I would invest in that. I remember one time being at a conference and a woman, she came up to me in between. I was at the book table and she just started telling me her story. And she had been widowed and then she had been married and divorced. And she was telling me that she's pretty much gotten to a point where she doesn't really even need a relationship with a man and she's not pursuing it. And she's telling me all the reasons why. And then her eyes are starting to water up and she's now tearing up. And that is distress. You know what I mean? That is not somebody who is even believing the words that are coming out of her mouth. That is somebody who is saying,
trying to convince themselves even.
Right, that I don't need this in my relationship. And yet physiologically, you're showing me something that reveals more truth about your heart than the words you're saying. And so I guess that I would take that kind of approach, is that if this is something that even if sex in your relationship is distressing, but you want to figure it out. Yeah. You know what I mean? There are a lot of people out there professionals who can help explore this with you so that you don't have to live forever this way if you want to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that really even
No,
explains
it
the
totally
Is
question,
women
but-
making grocery lists in their head, like, have you heard that from someone? Or that's a very oddly specific comment.
It is oddly specific,
And we're
isn't
moving
it?
on. Okay, so I think, oh, jeez. It's my aunt, man. So I think what I'm getting from your answer is like, just do something, because I think you can very easily make a case biblically that God created sex for marriage and it to be something that is beneficial for a relationship and beneficial for each spouse in a marriage. And so I think that my answer is just do something. Like sitting on your hands and expecting time to either resolve the issue or the desire from, my spouse, or to just all of a sudden one day it just snaps and I'm like, oh, okay, now I want it again. I think that is not a wise solution. I think doing something. And I think that that's oftentimes, at least in conversations I've been a part of, the struggle is, well then what? Because I think that's what we don't do. And I know for me, growing up in the church culture I had, it didn't feel like there were great examples of what that looked like. And so using what you brought to mind is great, because just doing something I think is going to help at least us move in the right direction.
Well, and I know I've heard from couples where the one spouse, that we're talking about in this question, they've just kind of given up. It's like, I just don't want to. I have no interest. And they've maybe resigned themselves and their marriage, like, if we never have sex again, I don't care. And that can be maybe a sad place to be. And I would just encourage you, if that's how you feel, like, to own it, be real, like, I just don't want to. But I would ask the question, are you willing to ask yourself the why question? Well, why not? When I say that, if I'm not even willing to explore why not, then I'm kind of shutting down a part of my relationship that we do see in Scripture, that we do see God made our bodies for, God designed our brains for. And so to at least be willing to say, well, why not? And maybe as you unpack that in your journal, with a friend, with a therapist, with someone you trust, you find out some answers that, well, I just have a lot of fear around it. Okay, address that fear. Or it's been painful, or it's never felt good. I've never felt like my needs were considered in the marriage bed with my spouse. And if you arrive at some of that why, and you're willing to, I think that would be a really important next step to communicate to your spouse. And at least give them that information to say, honestly, I'm not interested in sex because I feel like you never care about how it feels for me.
Yep.
And just having more sex isn't going to fix it. So it may at least clue your spouse in to an area they could, in humility, start to address and ask back to you, well, how could we work on that? What would be some baby steps in that direction? Because hopefully, if you're listening to this podcast and you're the one who just feels like, I don't care if we ever have sex, there's some part of you that wants to make it work. And there's something in your spouse that they're also wanting to work on something. They may be just drowning, feeling like, I don't even know what to start on, because I ask if we can have sex and I just get, no, I'm never interested. And I don't really know why. I was thinking too of this episode, Ben Franklin's the one who said, for every problem, there is a solution that is simple, clear, and wrong. And I think sometimes we can have that mindset when it comes to sex and marriage. Like, well, if we just did this one thing different, or if you would only, or if I would only, and I think what Heather's brought up in several of these answers is this is often very complex and layered and multifaceted. And so you may need to deal with that it hasn't felt good physically, and that there's unresolved trauma from your past, and your needs aren't being met, and maybe you don't understand your body to the degree that would help you, function well in sex. So if you feel like, well, I don't think there is any one thing, I'd say, well, yeah, that's kind of how we are as human beings. To think it's just one thing, it'd be great if that's all it was, but it's probably multifaceted. But I would just encourage you, the more you can unpack that, even if you're not having it your goal to be, I hope soon we start having great sex again, your goal is just to understand yourself and what's driving your motives. I think you're going to learn some healthy things that you will at least have some tools to work on and to grow in.
Yeah. And I want to circle back really quick. With all of this is never going to ask you to do things that make you feel unsafe. Like, we're not asking you to open yourself up to those things, but there is going to be a risk in re-engaging. And so I think finding that balance between, is this risky and uncomfortable versus is this safe or unsafe, finding that balance, because you do need to do what keeps you safe and feeling safe if you want to re-engage in this.